What if I told you that an entire country, not a colony, not a protectorate, but a land the size of Western Europe, was once owned by a single man, not governed, not represented, owned as private property? Its rivers, its forests, its people, every inch of it existed to serve the wealth and will of one European king who never once set foot on its soil. This man didn't conquer it through war. He didn't inherit it through bloodline. He didn't buy it. He asked for it. And the world, astonishingly, gave it to him. There were no elections, no treaties with the people who lived there, no consent, no negotiation. One man raised a flag over 2.3 million square kilometers of Central Africa, and for over 2 decades, he ruled it in silence, from a throne thousands of miles away. But this wasn't just another story of empire. It was something darker, something far more terrifying. He didn't rule it like a nation. He ran it like a business. Every tree became a calculation. Every person became a number. And every village that failed to meet his quotas paid in blood. In pieces. Hands were taken as receipts. Children were punished for rubber not harvested. And entire regions were emptied, not by war, but by paperwork, orders, logistics. This was not chaos. This was precision, brutality, systematized. At its height, it was the most profitable private enterprise in Europe. And it was also one of the deadliest. By the time the world found out, an estimated 10 million people were already gone. This is the story of how King Leopold II of Belgium created a blueprint for economic exploitation so efficient, its core design still exists today. And how the Democratic Republic of Congo, one of the most resource-rich places on Earth, is still paying the price for an empire that was never even called one. It was called the Congo Free State. But there was no freedom, only silence. Until now. In 1885, something happened that broke every rule of modern governance. A European monarch laid claim to a piece of land nearly 76 times the size of his own country. Not through invasion, not through diplomacy, not through bloodshed on European soil. He simply asked for it. And the world, with all its governments, ministers, and supposed moral standards, said yes. A country the size of Western Europe became the personal property of a single man. Not a government, not a crown, a man. For 23 years, this place was not a colony, not a protectorate, not a nation under foreign rule. It was a private estate, carved into zones, measured by quotas, and soaked in silence. The name of this land was the Congo Free State. But freedom was the one thing it never saw. The man who owned it was King Leopold II of Belgium. He became king in 1865, inheriting a tiny nation with little global influence. Belgium was young, peaceful, and uninterested in empire. Its parliament had no desire to fund overseas adventures. While Britain dominated India, while France expanded across West Africa, while Germany raced to claim its share of the world map, Belgium stayed quiet. And that silence drove Leopold mad. He wasn't interested in legacy through peace. He wanted prestige. He wanted power. And when he couldn't get it through his government, he went around it. He stopped asking for permission. He found another way. Leopold knew he couldn't conquer land by force. Belgium had no army for foreign conquest. So he crafted a different story. He presented himself not as a king desperate for territory, but as a visionary with a mission, a humanitarian, a civilizer, a man of progress. He created what appeared to be a philanthropic organization, the International Association of the Congo. Its stated purpose? To end the Arab slave trade, to bring Christianity and civilization, to open trade routes and help the native people join the modern world. It was a lie, a beautiful, well-dressed lie, and the world believed it. In 1884, European powers gathered in Berlin for a conference that would redraw the map of Africa forever. 14 nations, dozens of diplomats, not one African in the room. The goal was to avoid war between European powers by calmly deciding who would take which parts of the continent. Land was split like slices of meat. Rivers were assigned. Borders were drawn in ink, often with rulers. They called it order, but it was conquest under velvet gloves. Leopold sent his men to lobby behind the scenes. They argued he wasn't claiming land for Belgium. He was neutral. He would bring trade, not conquest. He had no imperial ambition, only moral purpose. And in a world increasingly afraid of letting any one empire become too powerful, this proposal was appealing. If Leopold controlled the Congo as a private man, no major European power would gain the upper hand. He became the perfect pawn of global balance. On February 26, 1885, the conference ended. Papers were signed. Maps were sealed. The Congo, 2.3 million square kilometers, was given not to Belgium, but to King Leopold himself. Personally, quietly, permanently. He now owned land 76 times larger than his own country. And no one stopped him. He didn't govern it. He didn't lead it. He never even saw it with his own eyes. Leopold ran the Congo like a business. A vast, bloody, ledger-driven enterprise. The goal was not development. It was not civilization. It was extraction. Rubber. Ivory. Wealth. The world was entering the industrial age, and rubber was gold. Tires. Belts. Wires. Machines. Bicycles. Cars. Electricity. The demand exploded. And in the dense rainforests of the Congo, rubber vines grew wild and thick, waiting to be harvested. Leopold saw this and understood it instantly. He wasn't sitting on a colony. He was sitting on a gold mine. He divided the Congo into zones, and those zones were handed to companies. Concessionary companies. On paper, these were separate entities, but many were secretly owned or directed by Leopold himself. Every village in each zone was assigned a rubber quota, an exact number of kilos they had to deliver every 2 weeks. It didn't matter how far they had to travel. It didn't matter how many vines they had to strip. It didn't matter what they ate, what they left behind, or how many could physically do the work. The quota was the law, and if it wasn't met, there was a price. Leopold's private army, the Force Publique, was not made of Europeans. It was made of Congolese men, recruited locally, given uniforms, barely paid, and ordered to enforce quotas with terror. The soldiers had quotas too, not just in violence, but in bullets. Every bullet had to be accounted for. You couldn't waste ammunition. And to prove a bullet had been used properly, not wasted on hunting, not lost in the jungle, the army required a receipt. That receipt was a severed hand. One bullet. One body. One hand. That was the logic. That was the system. And when soldiers failed to kill, they sometimes cut off hands anyway, from the living. Children. Elders. Anyone. Because the quota had to be met, and the paperwork had to be clean. Leopold didn't order this. He didn't need to. He built a system that rewarded terror and punished mercy. So the system optimized. It refined itself. It became efficient. Efficient at horror. This wasn't a failure of governance. It was functioning exactly as designed. Tens of thousands of villages were drained. Men vanished into the jungle, never returning. Women were held hostage to guarantee rubber delivery. Children were mutilated as warnings. Crops were abandoned. Food disappeared. Starvation came next. Disease followed. But the quotas continued. Because the market wanted rubber. And Leopold wanted profit. He became one of the richest men in Europe. But the people of the Congo were disappearing. No one knew exactly how many lived in the Congo when Leopold took power. There was no official census. Much of the land was unmapped. But researchers, using historical estimates, missionary records, and early population data, believe that in 1885, the population may have been around 20 million people. By 1924, years after Leopold had given up control, that number had dropped to 10 million. 10 million. A number so large, it escapes the mind. A loss so vast, it vanishes into abstraction. But these were people. Entire families. Cultures. Histories. Villages that would never speak again. Lives that left no trace but silence. And all of it, done in the name of business, in the name of civilization, in the name of progress. But eventually, the silence broke. Missionaries began to write letters. Workers on steamships whispered what they had seen. British diplomats visited, horrified. And then came the journalist, a man named E.D. Morel. Working for a shipping company, he noticed a strange pattern. Ships sent from Belgium to the Congo carried weapons, ammunition, and chains. Ships returning carried rubber and ivory. But no invoices, no payments, no trade. It wasn't trade. It was theft. When Morel went public, he sparked something new, an international outcry. For the first time in history, the global press turned its eyes to a remote African country ruled by a single man. Photographs, reports, testimonies, they began to spread. Public outrage grew. Petitions flooded in. And in 1903, a British diplomat named Roger Casement visited the Congo to investigate. What he found confirmed the worst. Casement traveled deep into the Congo. He interviewed survivors. He documented scars. He logged mutilations, disappearances, forced labor camps. His report, clinical, detailed, undeniable, shattered any remaining illusion that the Congo Free State was a humanitarian mission. It was the opposite. It was a blueprint for how to extract maximum profit from human suffering while hiding behind the veil of morality. Leopold denied it all. He dismissed the accusations as slander. He claimed it was a conspiracy against Belgium. He insisted the worst abuses were the actions of rogue agents, not a reflection of his leadership. But behind the palace doors, he panicked. He burned archives. He destroyed correspondence. He tried to erase the trail. But it was too late. The world had already begun to see. The pressure mounted. Newspapers published testimonies. Protest meetings erupted in London, Brussels, and New York. A campaign unlike any before it swept across the Western world. Writers, clergymen, politicians, and ordinary people demanded that something be done. The Congo Reform Association was born, one of the first international human rights movements in modern history. And it didn't stop. By 1908, even Belgium's parliament, the same institution that had once refused to fund colonial expansion, was forced to act. They could no longer ignore the global outrage or the stench that clung to Leopold's name. On November 15, 1908, the Belgian government officially annexed the Congo Free State. Leopold, at last, was forced to give up his personal empire, but not without reward. He received 50 million francs in compensation. Today, that's worth more than 130 million pounds. Paid not as punishment, but as a thank you for transferring ownership. He had taken millions of lives, amassed unthinkable wealth, and walked away richer than ever. He died the following year. Alone, hated, yet never prosecuted. And here's what stings the most. When Belgium took over the Congo, many expected things would change. The worst was over. The era of horror had ended. But in truth, the machine kept turning. The rubber quotas remained. Forced labor continued. The economic structure, the engine of extraction, was left untouched. Ownership changed. The system did not. Because it had never been about one man. It had always been about what that man represented. A model. A model for how to turn a country into a commodity. And that model didn't die in 1908. It adapted. Today, the Democratic Republic of Congo is one of the richest nations on Earth in terms of natural resources. Beneath its soil lies the future: cobalt, coltan, copper, diamonds, uranium, materials essential for everything from smartphones to electric cars to renewable energy. If you're watching this on a device, there's a good chance it contains minerals from the Congo. And yet, by GDP per capita, the DRC remains one of the poorest countries in the world. This is not a coincidence. The world still extracts from the Congo. It just wears a different face. Multinational corporations instead of concessionary companies. Government contracts instead of royal decrees. But the core remains the same. Wealth flows out, suffering stays behind. Villages near mines still lack clean water. Workers still labor in dangerous conditions. Children still die in the pursuit of materials for batteries that power lives far away from their own. And international headlines move on, distracted by the next crisis, the next war, the next distraction. But the structure is there, hidden in supply chains, protected by distance, justified by silence. This isn't just the story of King Leopold. This is the story of how the world learns to look away. How systems built on exploitation don't collapse, they evolve. And how, unless the incentives change, the outcome never will. It doesn't matter if it's rubber in the 1890s, diamonds in the 1990s, or cobalt in 2024. When profit has no limit, and accountability has no home, human life becomes negotiable, disposable, unseen. Leopold didn't invent colonialism. He didn't invent greed. But he perfected a version of it that could hide behind institutions, charities, progress. He showed that you didn't need an army or a nation to control millions of people. All you needed was a story convincing enough to make the world nod and look the other way. And the world is still nodding. Even today, the very language we use, developing nations, resource-rich but poor, fragile economies, conceals what's really happening. Extraction without investment. Dependency masked as aid. Trade deals where the scales are never balanced. Congo is not poor because it has nothing. It is poor because of how much it has and who controls it. In the final part, we will look at the echoes of Leopold's empire in today's world. How global systems built in the colonial age still influence politics, technology, and power. We'll ask what it takes to truly break free from this legacy, and whether it's even possible in a world still ruled by resource hunger. In the heart of Central Africa lies a contradiction so deep, so obvious, that most of the world has learned to ignore it. A nation that powers the devices we use every day, yet has some of the lowest electricity access in the world. A country with minerals critical to the green energy future, yet one of the highest rates of child labor on Earth. A place where cobalt and coltan flow out by the ton, but where hospitals run out of medicine, schools run without chalk, and roads vanish into the jungle. This is not failure. This is design. The blueprint was written over 100 years ago, not just by Leopold, but by a system that viewed African land and life as resources to be extracted, never as people to be invested in. When Leopold first carved the Congo into quotas and concessions, he laid the foundation for a model still in use today. Only now, instead of royal decrees, we have contracts. Instead of forced public soldiers, we have private security firms. Instead of severed hands, we have invisible chains, debt, dependency, and deals signed behind closed doors. Wealth doesn't trickle up from the ground and stay. It leaves, fast, and with it, leaves opportunity, infrastructure, sovereignty. Because in the global economic hierarchy, Congo is not a partner. It is a supplier, a permanent periphery to someone else's center. And this model isn't limited to Congo. It's echoed across the global south, in South America's lithium triangle, in Indonesia's nickel fields, in the oil-rich deltas of Nigeria. These regions don't lack wealth. They're drowning in it. But it's not theirs to spend. It's managed by foreign shareholders, traded on stock markets continents away, and protected by laws written in languages the people on the ground don't speak. The irony is impossible to ignore. In the 21st century, we talk about ethical consumption. We debate sustainable energy. We praise innovation. But we do it while holding devices powered by minerals pulled from the same earth where children still dig with their bare hands. And where is the outrage? It flickers when a photo goes viral, when a report makes the news, when a celebrity speaks up. But it fades. It always fades. Because the system doesn't need the world's attention. It only needs its silence. The silence that lets billion-dollar supply chains run without interruption. The silence that allows history to be rewritten in cleaner language. King Leopold called it civilization. Others call it development, aid, partnership. But look closely. Ask who benefits. Ask who decides. Ask who owns the ground and who gets the dust. The sad truth is that the Congo was never truly decolonized. It changed flags. It changed rulers. But the structure, the pipeline of wealth flowing out and control flowing in, never broke. And for many African countries, the same can be said. Independence was political. Economic independence never came. And when a nation tries to rewrite the rules, when they push back against the contracts, the IMF loans, the multinationals, the system punishes them, not always with war, sometimes with capital flight, sometimes with sanctions, sometimes with coups whispered into existence. Because in the eyes of the global order, stability doesn't mean justice. It means predictability. A stable regime is one that signs the right deals at the right price with the right partners. Whether or not its people eat, learn, or live in dignity, that's optional. So the question is no longer whether the world learned from Leopold's crimes. The question is whether it copied them. There's a reason this story is rarely taught in schools. A reason King Leopold's name isn't uttered in the same breath as the world's most infamous tyrants. A reason why the Congo is spoken of only in terms of instability, poverty, or war, but rarely in terms of what caused it. Because to face this truth means confronting more than history. It means confronting the foundations of today's world order. This isn't just about a king. It's about a system that rewards distance. The further you are from the suffering, the more you profit. The fewer questions you ask, the easier it is to believe the lie. In Leopold's time, the lie was that he was saving Africans. Today, the lie is that the market is neutral, that supply chains are clean, that progress can be built without paying the true cost. But someone always pays. Always. In Leopold's Congo, it was the millions whose hands became proof of punishment. Today, it's the miners inhaling toxic dust, the families displaced for new contracts, the workers who make dollars a day so that someone else can make millions in an hour. It's the same logic, written in a different language. And the most haunting part? Most of the world still doesn't know. Not because the information isn't available, but because the discomfort it brings is inconvenient. It forces us to look differently at the phones in our pockets, the cars on our streets, the banks we trust, the history we celebrate. It challenges the myth that colonialism is over, that empires ended with independence movements and flag changes, when in truth, empire just learned to operate in silence, in contracts, in boardrooms, in balance sheets. And the Congo is still its test subject, a country with the power to fuel the global economy, yet no power to control its own. A people rich in culture, resilience, and vision, trapped by systems designed to keep them extractable. Not partners, not equals, assets, risks, commodities. Leopold may be dead, but his model lives. It lives in foreign mining deals that strip the land and leave nothing behind. It lives in the debt traps that force governments to privatize everything. It lives in media narratives that reduce nations to violence, corruption, and helplessness, while ignoring the outside forces that sustain those conditions. It lives in how history is remembered, sanitized, forgotten, or never taught at all. Because the most dangerous legacy of exploitation isn't just material. It's psychological. When people are told for generations that their suffering is normal, their land is cursed, their struggle is internal, they start to believe it. And the rest of the world, relieved of responsibility, moves on. But history doesn't move on. It waits. It lingers. It shows itself in patterns. The roads that were never built. The hospitals that never had supplies. The schools that never had books. The minerals that left but never returned. Leopold's shadow is long, and it doesn't just stretch over the Congo. It falls over every part of the world where wealth and power have been taken, not earned. Over every system where morality is optional but profit is sacred. Over every place where silence is more profitable than justice. So here we are. You've just learned that a European king once owned a country bigger than Germany, France, and Spain combined, as personal property. That he never set foot there. That he never faced justice. That he turned the suffering of millions into one of the most profitable private enterprises in modern history. You've learned that this wasn't an accident of history. It was a system built carefully, methodically, deliberately. That the severed hands, the mass deaths, the ghost towns, the silence, none of it was out of control. It was the design. And perhaps most disturbing of all, you've learned that it didn't end. That today, the Democratic Republic of Congo still bleeds resources, still exports wealth it cannot keep, still powers the modern world while living in the ruins of a forgotten empire. If this was the first time you heard this story, ask yourself, why? Why don't we learn this in school? Why do we speak of colonialism like it ended with independence? Why do we pretend the past is over when we live in its consequences every single day? The truth is, most of history is still hidden, sanitized, watered down to protect comfort, reputation, and power. But history doesn't stop at the past. It builds the present, and it silently controls the future unless we break the silence. And that's why this channel exists. Because the world we live in was not shaped by random events. It was engineered. And if you want to understand why countries stay poor, why borders don't make sense, why power never seems to change hands, you have to look deeper. Past the headlines. Past the textbooks. Into the structures that no one wants to talk about. If this story made you think, if it opened your eyes to something you hadn't seen before, then this is just the beginning. Every video on this channel uncovers what's beneath the surface. Stories of exploitation, resistance, power, propaganda, wealth, and the invisible hands that move the world. So subscribe right now, because the next episode will take you even further. We'll expose more untold stories, from the secret banks that fund wars, to the forgotten treaties that still bind nations, to the corporations that operate like empires. Like this video, not just for the algorithm, but because it tells YouTube this kind of content matters. That truth deserves space on this platform. Leave a comment. Share what shocked you, what made you angry, what you want to see next. This isn't just a channel. It's a conversation. A community of people willing to ask the hard questions and face the uncomfortable answers. And most importantly, share this video with your friends, with your family, with someone who still thinks history is just something that happened a long time ago. Because the truth is, it never left. History is not behind us. It's all around us. And if we don't understand it, we repeat it. See you in the next one.